Hello all, welcome to this session, IBM Maximo Application Suite on AWS. My name is Roshan Thomas. I'm a Senior Solutions Architect based in Melbourne, Australia. I look after the power and utilities customer in Australia. Let's kick this session off by looking at the agenda. Firstly, we'll look at what IBM Maximo is, after which we'll introduce what Maximo Application Suite or MAS 8 is. We'll then look at what is changing between IBM Maximo and IBM MAS. We'll then try and understand why now more than ever customers have to start planning the transition from IBM Maximo to IBM MAS. We'll also look at why AWS is best placed to run your IBM Maximo workloads. We'll then look at a number of customer scenarios that are running IBM Maximo and the best approaches for those customers to migrate or upgrade to IBM MAS 8. All right, let's start off. So what is IBM Maximo? IBM Maximo is an enterprise asset management solution which looks after the entire lifecycle management for an organization's physical assets. IBM has featured as a leader in the Gartner's Magic Quadrant for Enterprise Asset Management Software since 1996. The most current version of IBM Maximo that most organizations run is Maximo 7. Right? So let's have a look at what IBM Maximo Application Suite is and how it differs from IBM Maximo. IBM Maximo Application Suite is a combination or a grouping of a number of IBM's enterprise asset management products. Right? It's often termed as MAS 8 or Maximo Application Suite 8, where 8 is the version number, the starting version number for MAS. As we heard, MAS is a combination of a number of enterprise or a grouping of a number of enterprise asset management products. Let's have a look at what that means. We looked at Maximo 7 before. Maximo 7 in MAS now becomes Maximo Manage. IBM's visual inspection product within MAS now becomes MVI or Maximo Visual Inspection. All right, now that we have understood and looked at what MAS 8 is, let's look at what is changing. We do understand that MAS is a new grouping of multiple EM products into the Maximo Application Suite umbrella. But more importantly, Maximo now transitions away from a traditional client-server topology to a Kubernetes container management platform. Now it is important to note that Maximo is only supported on Red Hat OpenShift Kubernetes container platform. It no longer runs the traditional WebSphere application server, but it has now moved to WebSphere Liberty, which is more suited to cloud technologies. With this move to MAS 8, it is important to understand that IBM has also moved to a new licensing model using app points. To understand this transition from IBM Maximo to MAS 8, let's have a look at the IBM Maximo transition. In July 2019 is when IBM acquired Red Hat. In June 2020, Maximo Application Suite, the first version of Maximo Application Suite, was created running on Red Hat OpenShift cluster. In November of 2021 was the first release of Maximo Manage that was released on MAS. The most recent release of Maximo Manage is 8.5, which runs on MAS 8.9. As you can see, there's been a number of version upgrades already since June 2020 when MAS was first released. All right, so why are we talking about the upgrade from IBM Maximo to MAS 8? Maximo 7.6.1, which is the latest release of Maximo 7, is the last release of Maximo Asset Management 7. IBM announced the end of support for Maximo 7 in April 2022, with the end of marketing date as April 19, 2024. Right? Now, what does end of marketing mean? End of marketing means that IBM will no longer sell parts or licenses for Maximo 7. Right? The only Maximo license that it can sell would be the MAS licenses. What this means to existing customers is, let's say they've got a brand new business unit that is wanting to use Maximo. For that additional user licenses, customers will now have to procure MAS licenses as opposed to Maximo licenses. Right? Now, more importantly, post September 2025, which is the end of life for Maximo 7, fixes and patches and telephone support will also no longer be available for Maximo 7.6.1x. Right? So it is quite clear that the path forward for all Maximo EM customers is to trade up to the IBM Maximo application suite or IBM MAS 8. Thus, it is important to start planning. It is really important to start planning your Maximo upgrade to ensure a smooth migration. All right, just to stress the fact that the end of marketing date is April 19, 2024, and the end of life is September 2025. All right, now let's look at why AWS is best placed to run your Maximo workloads. In May of 2022, last year, IBM and AWS signed a strategic collaboration agreement with plans to offer a broad array of its software catalog via the AWS marketplace. Since this announcement, IBM has now got 3 unique Maximo application suite or MAS offerings in the AWS marketplace. We will look at these offerings in detail in the coming slides, but one of these offerings is a Maximo application suite as a service or a SaaS solution for MAS. Now, it is important to understand that outside of IBM Cloud, AWS Cloud is the only cloud provider which offers a SaaS solution through its marketplace. All right. Now, other reasons why you should look at using AWS to run your Maximo workloads is running your MAS on AWS means that you will essentially inherit the latest security controls AWS uses for its own infrastructure. AWS provides third-party validations for thousands of global requirements like SOC, PCI, FedRAMP, IRAP, and a lot more. With AWS, you take advantage of a scalable and reliable and secure global computing infrastructure. And with AWS tools like auto scaling, elastic load balancing, your applications can actually scale up or down based on demand. Backed by Amazon's massive infrastructure, you now have access to compute and storage resources when you need them. Especially with AWS managed services like relational database as a service, managed Kafka, Red Hat OpenShift on AWS, also known as ROSA, you can leave the undifferentiated heavy lifting in relation to managing infrastructure with AWS. You can now start to focus on your business, the business that differentiates you from your competitors. Finally, if you're already an AWS customer running your Maximo workloads closer to other business critical workloads, ensures that you benefit from AWS services like analytics as well as AIML. Next, let's have a look at the key elements of MAS on AWS architecture. Now, MAS or Maximo Application Suite actually runs on Red Hat OpenShift cluster. It's important to understand that the Red Hat OpenShift cluster runs on AWS EC2 infrastructure, right? Also, please note that Red Hat OpenShift cluster is an implementation of Kubernetes, right? It is on this Red Hat OpenShift cluster that Maximo application suite actually runs, right? Now, let's take an example of a customer that has got a medium to high customized Maximo running in their environment, and they're looking to move to Maximo application suite. They can have customizations stored in their own repository, whilst bringing the standard Maximo implementation from the IBM Entitled Registry. So it is possible for customers to migrate their existing customizations onto any cloud provider like AWS. Right? All right, so now that we know that there are essentially these two components involved, which is OpenShift cluster as well as Maximo application suite, right? Let's see how can customers as well as partners install them on AWS. Let's explore a few options there. All right, so let's look at OpenShift cluster. Now, when we talk about OpenShift cluster, there are two options available to customers. The first option is Red Hat OpenShift Container Platform, also known as Red Hat OCP. Now, Red Hat OCP is a self-managed offering for OpenShift cluster, which basically means that the customer gets full control of their environment, of the Kubernetes implementation. It is self-managed though, which means that they need to have resources at hand to be managing the cluster, performing version upgrades, performing patch management, and all the all the elements of infrastructure management as when it comes to Red Hat OpenShift. Right? If you are a customer that has got a requirement to run your Maximo workload in AWS GovCloud, let's say you're a nuclear customer, for example, then there is certainly OpenShift Container Platform is the only option on AWS. The second option when it comes to OpenShift cluster is Red Hat OpenShift on AWS, also known as ROSA. The key thing here to understand is ROSA is a fully managed turnkey application platform that is essentially managed by both AWS as well as Red Hat site reliability engineers or SREs. So the key benefit for customers is it's a fully managed offering, right? Especially when customers are looking to move from IBM Maximo 7 to MAS 8, they can rely on the managed offering that ROSA provides to take focus off the undifferentiated heavy lifting around the infrastructure management for the OpenShift cluster. Again, one thing to note though is if you are a customer that has got a requirement to run your Maximo workload on AWS GovCloud, ROSA at this point is not available in GovCloud. So at this point, if you're running on AWS GovCloud, your only option then becomes Red Hat OpenShift Container Platform or Red Hat OCP. All right, now that we have looked at the OpenShift cluster, let's have a look at what are the various options in which you can actually install Maximo Application Suite, also known as MAS 8. All right, so the first option and the most straightforward option for customers would be AWS Marketplace, right? AWS and IBM have together put three unique offerings on AWS Marketplace. The first offering is MAS with bringing your own license. So it is, let's say you're a customer that is already running Maximo on premises or on AWS already, and you actually want to bring your Maximo workloads to Maximo. MAS with BIOL would be a good option for you. In addition, there is a MAS SaaS offering. Outside of IBM Cloud, important to note that AWS is the only cloud provider that provides customers with a MAS SaaS option. In scenarios where, let's say, you as a customer have already only procured MAS licenses without Red Hat OCP licenses, there is an offering available on AWS Marketplace that customers can procure, which basically includes a Red Hat OpenShift and OpenShift container platform entitlement as well. Right. So the key feature or key takeaway is if you choose to go down AWS Marketplace, you essentially get that familiar click and subscribe model. You can deploy the AWS Marketplace offering of MAS onto either Red Hat OpenShift on AWS cluster, or a ROSA cluster, or an OCP cluster. Right. One thing to note is AWS Marketplace is not available in AWS GovCloud. So if you're a customer that has got a specific requirement to run your Maximo workload on AWS GovCloud, at this point in time, that would not be an option. You cannot use AWS Marketplace to install Maximo on AWS GovCloud. The second option of installing MAS on an OpenShift cluster is using the Ansible automation. So IBM has actually developed a MAS DevOps Ansible collection and made it available through the Apache license on GitHub. Customers can actually download this MAS DevOps Ansible collection and install MAS on the OpenShift cluster that they have chosen. You obviously get a lot more flexibility because you yourself are handling the components and selecting packages, operators that you're actually installing on OpenShift. So that's the added benefit. On AWS GovCloud, as AWS Marketplace is not an option, you going down the path of using Ansible automation to install MAS is the best option for you. Remember, you can do ClickOps, essentially using a browser and clicking on buttons to actually install MAS on OpenShift cluster. However, that is not a recommended option as there are a fair few steps involved. So it's always it is most advised. It is advised that you either use the AWS Marketplace offering or use the Ansible automation to deploy MAS on OpenShift cluster. All right, so next let's look at some customer scenarios. We'll look through a few customer scenarios and we'll assess what would be the suggested approach for such a customer to migrate from Maximo 7 to MAS 8. If you're a customer that's new to Maximo, or if you're an existing Maximo customer that does not have a lot of customizations and you do have a minimal amount of configurations and largely use out-of-the-box Maximo as such today, then the suggested approach for you would be to actually use the AWS Marketplace offering called IBM MAS as a service. So this SaaS offering is ideal for customers who are wanting to use a SaaS offering and do not want to actually manage the infrastructure within their AWS accounts. This also offers licensing, so the AWS Marketplace offering also includes the Maximo licenses as part of the offering. Now, if you're a customer that is running Maximo on premises, or even you're already running on AWS commercial cloud, and you're looking to migrate from Maximo 7 to Maximo 8, but however, in doing so, because you're new to OpenShift cluster as such, you're looking to leverage the AWS managed services. Um, if you are such a customer, then the most suggested option would be if you create yourself a Red Hat OpenShift cluster on AWS, which is a managed offering, which basically means that it's managed by both IBM and AWS site reliability engineers. Um, Once you have an existing ROSA cluster, you can subscribe to AWS Marketplace offering, which installs MAS on the ROSA cluster. Right. All right. So if you, again, the third customer scenario is you are a customer that is running Maximo already, either on premises or AWS Cloud. Um, but you have this requirement of managing your own infrastructure. You have a team that is well equipped to essentially manage and patch and perform the entire infrastructure management for an OpenShift cluster. Then you can go ahead and create an OpenShift container platform cluster or an OCP cluster to the specifications of your choice, and then subscribe to an IBM Marketplace offering that installs Maximo. So, whilst OCP is self-managed, installing the MAS can be via Marketplace, um, which basically enables you to install MAS on your self-managed OCP cluster. The fourth and final customer scenario that we are exploring here is when the customer has a special need or a requirement to run their MAS workloads on AWS GovCloud. Now, in this scenario, as we saw, AWS Marketplace is not an option to install MAS. We also heard in the previous slide that ROSA at this point is not available on AWS GovCloud. Given these two constraints, the best option, the suggested approach for the customer would be to install an OCP cluster within your VPC and then go ahead and install MAS using the Ansible automation. All right, so I hope that that the various customer scenarios gave you an idea of what various customer scenarios could be and what the suggested approaches could be as well. Now, as we have seen, the migration from Maximo 7 to Maximo Application Suite 8 can be an involved process, and for customers there is the option of relying on partners. On display on the slide are a number of our partners that are both AWS partners as well as IBM Maximo implementation partners, and in this scenario where customers are looking to migrate from or upgrade from Maximo 7 to MAS 8, taking the help of the partner to do that initial migration is a great choice for customers. Okay, so now let's look at some next steps around what AWS is doing to make it easy for customers and partners to actually run their Maximo workloads or MAS workloads on AWS. Now, one of the most important tasks that we have taken is creation of an IBM MAS on AWS workshop. It is aimed at customers as well as partners, and it approximately takes around 6 to 8 hours of time. It's a hands-on approach for customers as well as partners to go through an entire implementation of MAS on AWS. And it helps customers walk through a number of approaches like installing from an AWS marketplace or actually setting up their own private cluster, or even setting up MAS on AWS GovCloud. Now, please note that this is the first release of the that's planned in the next month of the IBM MAS on AWS workshop, which also provides a decision matrix for customers to choose from 6 different options that customers can actually go down, and it provides that prescriptive guidance to help customers. As you can see, it goes through the marketplace offering, the Ansible collection path of installing MAS on AWS, as well as setting up a private cluster, which is quite a popular option, could be quite a popular option for most customers. Towards the end, we also talk about adding an industry solution, as you might already have some industry solutions within your Maximo install base. And at the end, it'll be a 6 to 8 hour workshop that follows a step-by-step process of installing Maximo and get you started on that MAS on AWS journey. We do have plans to have a second release of this workshop, which actually migrates or walks through the steps to migrate from Maximo 7 to MAS 8, helping you further in that whole migration approach and helping you progress further. All right, so we have reached the end of the presentation, IBM Maximo Suite on AWS. Here are a few resources that you could find handy. The first one is Red Hat OpenShift on AWS, also known as ROSA. The link, the QR code there links to the IBM, the ROSA documentation for AWS. Feel free to follow the documentation. The other quite an important documentation is IBM's documentation, which focuses on MAS on AWS. Highly recommend going through that as well as in addition to the workshop when it becomes available. All right. So in today's session, what did we cover? We covered what exactly is IBM Maximo, what is IBM MAS. What is the main difference between IBM Maximo as well as IBM MAS, and what are the various version upgrades that have happened? Why is it important for you to think about and plan your upgrade now, and why AWS is best placed to run your MAS workloads? We also learned that there's a workshop that is coming up soon, which will walk you through and provide you prescriptive guidance around the path that would be most appropriate to you. Towards the end, we also shared with you a few customer scenarios and the best approach for those customer scenarios to migrate from Maximo 7 to MAS 8. Just to close off, my name is Roshan Thomas, and my email address is displayed on the screen. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. If not, thank you so much for listening, and I hope to hear from you soon. Thank you.